Welcome to a special edition of Creature Guide Live Daily News. Today we're going over Tyrannosaurus rex as well as other species of Tyrannosaur closely related to the species. And we're streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. So let's bring up T Rex first. Now, when it comes to Tyrannosaurus rex, this is one of the last of this major lineage of dinosaurs, being the Tyrannosauroideae lineage of theropods. So this is also a branch of the Coelurosaurs, which first evolved during the Middle Jurassic period, a little more than 166 million years ago, as well as some of the earliest species of tyrannosaurs.
What do you mean
But
they were the last species of Tyrannosaur?
T Rex existed or evolved in North America somewhere between 67 and 68 million years ago, which is during the last 2 million years of the dinosaurs' reign or the Mesozoic era. It also coexisted with smaller species of theropods, like possibly a species of dromaeosaur or a raptor called Dakotaraptor. There is a lot of debate with the animal being a valid genus, but still is plausible or possible, I guess. And as well as a smaller species of Tyrannosaur being a Nanotyrannus. So,
What I meant, I I'm confused. They were Was Tyrannosaurus Rex the last Tyrannosaur, or are you saying it's one of the last ones?
technically, you could say he was one of the last ones. We don't know precisely who was specifically the last, but T Rex and Nanotyrannus did go extinct at the very end of the Mesozoic era, around 66 million years ago. So, Tyrannosaurus rex has been found in a wide variety of different states, including Montana, South Dakota, Wyoming, possibly certain remains coming in from North Dakota, but especially the Hell Creek Formation over in Montana is one of the hotspots for finding different specimens of Tyrannosaurus rex, as well as its own different prey species or the animals that it hunted, such as Triceratops, the Hadrosaur edmontosaurus, um, even the ostrich-like dinosaurs or the ornithomimids, such as a specific species. It's not hitting me at the moment. Some other people, or I think some of the general public, is a bit more familiar with an ostrich-like dinosaur called Calamimus, but that animal existed far prior to T Rex in a completely different part of the world. But focusing on T Rex, this animal could reach over 42 feet in length, or pushing around 13 meters, and weighs somewhere around 11 tons. It would definitely be a much larger individual. But this animal also had a skull that was about 4.5 feet in length, or pushing somewhere around 1.35 meters. And likely the skull alone probably weighed somewhere around 1,200 pounds or a little over 500 kilograms. And T Rex, at least when it comes to the speed of this animal, there's been a major debate as to how fast this animal could run. I think originally when T Rex was first reconstructed, it was just a walker. Also, having a more vertical, upright walking position is or just an overall stature, as well as dragging its tail on the ground and probably not being able to run much more or walk much faster than 10 to 11 miles per hour, or maybe a little over 18 kilometers per hour. So, this animal, probably when it comes to more reconstructions of its overall locomotion, at top speed was probably somewhere between 20 to 25 miles per hour, or a little over maybe 40 to 45 kilometers per hour. But that's because the different species of dinosaurs that it coexisted with, it didn't need tremendous speed for hunting, really relying on a lot of brute force as opposed to earlier species of tyrannosaurs where speed would have come in much more handy. So, this is definitely one of the major depictions of Tyrannosaurus Rex, I guess you could say, in the past 20 to maybe 22 years. Actually, no, I'd say like somewhere around 25 years. Spinosaurus and T Rex did not coexist with each other. And so the Spinosaurus is the animal with the elongated back vertebrae on its back. And this animal existed over in Egypt and as well as Morocco around 98 million years ago during the early late Cretaceous period. So T Rex wouldn't evolve until around 68 million years ago over in Montana. And there weren't even any species of tyrannosaurs that we have discovered that coexisted with Spinosaurus. But even if there were, it's very likely that they were much smaller compared to Spinosaurus and wouldn't even pose a threat. But also, when it comes to Spinosaurus in this depiction, I guess you could say towards the early 2000s, even the earlier 2010s, even prior to an extent back in the 90s, Spinosaurus was reconstructed with having much longer hind legs compared to its body size, as opposed to today's reconstructions. But it did undergo a bit of a period where Spinosaurus had very short hind limbs that almost seemed to have not been able to support its weight. But fortunately, with more recent reconstructions, they're a bit longer now. But when it comes to like these early 2010s depictions, they're far too muscular for the animal.
Wait, is this from Jurassic Park 3?
No. This seems to be. I'm not. I've seen it before. I'm not sure exactly where it's from. The Spinosaur model seems to be a bit like some model from a video game.
Would that
Uh,
arm have survived?
No, no species of dinosaur would have been able to survive the bite, or at least when it comes to theropod dinosaurs specifically. And if their arm was bitten by a T Rex, it would immediately be pulled off because T Rex did have what looks to be the strongest bite force of any land animal to, well, I'll say of any fully terrestrial animal to exist. So, really only inhabiting the land. Certain species of crocodilomorphs are members of the pseudosuchian lineage of archosauromorph reptiles would have likely had a slightly larger bite force compared to T. rex, such as possibly the later crocodilomorph Purosaurus, the late Cretaceous crocodilomorph Deinosuchus, as well as even the early Cretaceous crocodilomorph Sarcosuchus. But
Lean
Sarcosuchus,
Lean Nest, is that from a game?
that's what I am guessing. It could be like the primal carnage Spinosaurus, at least a certain type of model. The T Rex, I do not know what that comes from. Um,
So, the the fight in Jurassic Park 3 where the Spinosaurus kills the T-Rex, is that even possible?
for a younger T Rex, if it's like 4 or 5 years old, it would certainly be possible for an adult Spinosaurus. Spinosaurus could still reach a length of somewhere around 50 feet or pushing up to 15 meters and probably weigh somewhere around 8 to 9 tons. 9 tons would be pushing it. Still a very large Spinosaurus, certainly is possible. But, a full-grown T-Rex, the Spinosaurus would simply be no match for. Its skull structure is very thin and weak compared to the more broad, robust morphology of the different larger species of Tyrannosaurs. I'd say Spinosaurus might even have a bit of a problem with certain smaller species, but it would be pushing it. I mean, you're still comparing an 8 to 9 ton animal with some of the 3 or 4 ton tyrannosaurs before T Rex. The other tyrannosaurs would still have a huge problem. But Spinosaurus was likely just feeding on different species of fish. It might have hunted different species of smaller plant eating ornithopod dinosaurs, like the different species of iguanodontids that it coexisted with, or maybe a younger sauropod. But both of the different lineages of dinosaurs that I'm describing that Spinosaurus might have occasionally hunted were not very heavily built. They didn't have armor like the ankylosaurs or the ceratopsians, or even the stegosaurs of the Jurassic and early Cretaceous. What's another thing? Or even the nodosaurs. So it wouldn't take very much when it came to overall um, I guess just buffness of the specifically like the skull and even the arms, like especially when it comes to the claws of Spinosaurus, to take down those animals. But T Rex was specifically evolved for taking down some of the most heavily armored terrestrial land animals to ever exist. So it needed to be extremely powerful. That now the interesting thing is even when it comes to speed on Spinosaurus, it probably wasn't much quicker if it was as quick as a T-Rex. But Spinosaurus likely, I mean, it's still a huge guess, but didn't probably even come into contact with at least physical contact with like the different species of larger Carcharodontosaur theropods in the region, like Carcharodontosaurus that it coexisted with. This is probably taking place a bit earlier in time. I don't believe this is a T Rex because of the Centrosaur ceratopsian in the background. However, when it comes to the hadrosaur that the animal is stepping on in this depiction, it could be an Edmontosaurus or a close relative. Um, this is probably the Tyrannosaur that's depicting in this came before T Rex is likely a Daspletosaurus by the overall shape of the skull. I don't believe it's a Tarbosaurus because Tarbosaurus didn't really coexist with any species of Centrosaurs that looked anywhere similar to the animal in the background. And when it came to hadrosaurs, it coexisted in many cases with hadrosaurs just as large as itself or bigger. So, Daspletosaurus was more of like a mid-sized tyrannosaur, but it was on the upper spectrum. This animal could reach probably somewhere between 30 to 35 feet in length, or pushing 9 to 11 meters, and likely weighed in somewhere around 5 to 6 tons on the upper end.
Okay,
So,
this guy I think just has a funny face.
yeah, this is a very skinny T-Rex, which is probably what it's trying to depict. And the teeth, like they this animal should have lips covering both parts of the jaw. What is interesting is that it seems to be when it comes to the reconstruction in centered in between a Jurassic Park T-Rex reconstruction and one of the more modern reconstructions of a paleo accurate T-Rex. So it's still fairly off. Even like the stature of the animal. This one also has a bit of a problem. It always did. It's far too skinny. It also seems to have a bit of a kangaroo like stance when it comes to, like, I guess, the left foot. If you're like standing on the same side with it. Or the one that's just centered a bit more forward. But T Rex, and as well as pretty much every other species of dinosaur, it seems, walked only on their toes. Now, you could say when the animal was sitting, because most dinosaurs had the ability to sit, it would have been able to simply sit on its ankles. But when it came to running, it's not going to be running on its ankles like a bear or a person would, or possibly even like a, well, kangaroos don't necessarily, run on their ankles either. They really are only coming to contact with their ankles when they're sitting or, foraging or just slowly walking. Okay, so, hmm, I don't know precisely where this Triceratops model is from. The T-Rex one looks a bit more familiar. I think this is more of like a late 2010 sort of a depiction of a T-Rex. And this animal is showing as having a bit more of like a longer sort of a skull structure, which is better compared to a Jurassic Park T-Rex model, which I still think is one of the greatest models of a T-Rex. It's just when it comes to paleo accuracy, it is a bit off. Same thing for like the Triceratops model in Jurassic Park. I mean, I do think it looks good. It's just it's even more far off than compared to the Jurassic Park T Rex model. For instance, Triceratops is a bit of a shorter tail compared to its body size. Also, it would be a bit more elevated off the ground, and also as the animal aged, it seems that the horns of Triceratops likely would have curved downward slightly, possibly, a bit up towards the sky, like as you hit towards the edges of the horns. Also, probably reaching a length in some cases of 4 to 5 feet, or pushing, somewhere around 1.5 or 1.6 meters. But aside from Triceratops, I don't think The depictions of Triceratops are terrible here. I think that the frills could be a bit wider and also a bit more protruding. Like what I mean by that is facing towards the front of the animal a bit more. They seem to be like shielding the neck a little too much in this instance, which is a bit of a trait that you see on other species of ceratopsians, which is the family of horned dinosaurs that Triceratops belongs to. Especially a completely different lineage of ceratopsians, the centrosaurs. They are notorious for having a wide variety of skulls that would have really had that protective sort of look to, or compared to other ceratopsian species.
Okay, I'm giving him because he looks like he's kept his teeth brushed.
Yeah, I think it's some toy.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, actually, I think it's like that Popo T Rex toy, but somebody changed it or they changed it a bit. Um, yeah, he's got issues. I mean, when it comes to the upper skull, the upper part of the jaw, it's a bit off when it comes to even just the front of the snout. It should be much more elongated, even the bottom jaw. Um, I think it's a bit too squarish, I think, even towards the back of the skull as well. Um, yeah, I guess even also when it comes to the neck musculature with this T Rex, I think there should be even more.
Okay, this guy looks like
Even the
he's
tail seems a
starving.
bit thin from what we can see. This could be representing a T Rex because that seems to be either a Torosaurus or a Triceratops in the background, or what he's eating. Because when you're looking at the frill of that ceratopsian, it doesn't exactly have an exact Triceratops look to it because Triceratops is very circular, like not entirely, but it's quite circular in shape. Torosaurus is a bit more of like a square, or you could even say rectangle for how long of a skull it has, considering Torosaurus, um, a species of ceratopsian, or even more specifically, a chasmosaur. So the chasmosaurs were the lineage of ceratopsians that both Triceratops and Torosaurs belong to. Torosaurus's skull morphology is just a bit more squarish, which is why I think this is possibly a Torosaurus. However, its horns kind of represent more of a Triceratops, and even its tail to an extent.
Wouldn't he have trouble in the mud?
T Rex would probably have some issues in the swamp, considering. Well, I don't know. I think that's still up for debate. Now, the ceratopsians, not so much, considering animals like Triceratops and Torosaurus. Both of these animals inhabited different swampy and more of like a marsh or open woodland environments, especially when it comes to swamp. They have very wide feet compared to their body size, which helps splay their weight out and in many cases helps them prevent their massive weight from sinking into the mud. T Rex, on the other hand, it didn't necessarily have small feet compared to its body size, but it probably would have had a bit more trouble roaming the swamps as opposed to Triceratops. Especially since it's also having to center all of its weight on its 2 feet. Oh yeah, I think I've seen this model. In fact, I think there's like a life-sized model of a T Rex that has like the exact same shape. It's just a different color. Um, they gave this animal tremendous arms. That is huge, but really just a small,
Where he carries his fat
yeah, wrist and fingers.
and his legs.
It's like this guy was focusing on cardio way too much and decided to put all of his gains in like his humerus, like his forearm, but skipped even like his fingers. I'm not sure exactly what he was doing, but anyway, he's probably, like, just lifting in Montesaurus skulls. That's not gonna get you very far. Um, okay, when it comes to the tail, I think it might be a bit short, but it's also lacking a bit of muscle, especially towards the back end of the tail. The legs also need some more muscle. If we were looking at an animal like a much earlier species of Tyrannosaur, like Electrosaurus from 90 million-year-old Mongolia, or we were looking at, possibly maybe even an Albertosaurus from Alberta, Canada, like around 76 million years ago. The legs are probably not far off, though I think the toes look like this animal was using nail clippers. There's something weird. You know what they look like?
He went in for a pedicure.
No, no, no. It's like he decided to, um, oh, what's the word? Assimilate with Spinosaur culture. You know what I mean? Because look at his toes; they're extremely flat compared to the curved toes that you see on most species of theropods. But he thought, no, 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 I'm going to munch on large species of fish, maybe even go after smaller guanodontids. I'm just giving up on this armored dinosaur hunting strategy. That explains quite a bit about this animal. He's a traitor. He doesn't want to stick with his Tyrannosaur kin. Anyway, it's just a joke. But T Rex, because I think they're supposed to represent Japan, um, did not inhabit any part of Asia. It was explicitly restricted to North America. There was the close, well,
Wait, this is in Asia?
I'm guessing those are
Oh, I didn't
Japanese
even realize
or
that in the background.
Chinese buildings, but it was really cherry blossoms giving it away. So, also when it comes to the youngsters, the Jurassic Park: The Lost World, which is where these models originate from, I think they're good looking, Jurassic Park baby T-Rex. But when it comes to a realistic T-Rex, they are far off. These animals would have had very thin and narrow jaw structures compared to the adults. Also, the adults are fairly off in this picture too, but they're a bit closer to the realistic specimen than babies are to their paleo-accurate look. We look up also like a baby. Is it showing any like baby T-Rexes? Because you had it where with pretty much every species of Tyrannosaur, they started off with very thin, long, thin, and narrow snouts. And then as they became older, depending on the species, especially as you were looking at different species of larger, yeah, but not even this individual. He's fairly off. They would have been covered in feathers, very likely, and probably every species of Tyrannosaur had babies covered in feathers. He's closer. I think the puffiness of his plumage is making it a bit off. But when it comes to, the skull structure, this is closer to what a baby T-Rex would have looked like. Yeah, yeah, this is better. That very elongated, narrow snout, almost like with what you see in adult specimens of Tyrannosaurs, such as Kizionosaurus. But, this animal, like, once it started hitting probably 7 to 10 years old, it would start showing a very or a much more broader sort of a skull structure. I think this is just another picture of the one where it was constantly moving back and forth. Now, when it comes to the arms of these animals, they were slightly longer compared to their body size when they were young and wouldn't really catch up with them as they became older. But that's where, yeah, pretty much a lot of just evolution when it came to growing increased on the skull part. I don't know what he's from, but he's fairly far off. I mean, he's much closer to the Lost World model. Um, Also, he shouldn't be standing with his tail on the ground. And if anything, that could cause, at least in the way that he's doing it, some stature issues. Though T-Rex did have the ability to sit, but it wouldn't be in this manner. Be a bit more horizontal, kind of like when he's standing. I think this is one of the animatronic puppets from the Lost World. So it wouldn't be much until much later in their growth stages that you start seeing something that somewhat resembles this, but still going to have a much longer snout because T Rex in general also had a longer snout compared to the Jurassic Park model, or you could even say like the 1990s, 1980s, even early 2000s look. Though there were certain depictions of T Rex even back in the 1980s, like I think even by Dr. Robert T. Bacher, who's the paleontologist that bring back the theory that dinosaurs were not these cold-blooded, unintelligent, um, reptilian, I guess, slow creatures, but they were actually very intelligent, possibly even, or very likely even feathered in many cases, warm-blooded and quick animals. So, some of his reconstructions in his book, The Dinosaur Heresies, do show the T Rex as having a slightly more elongated skull compared to their body size. Let's see. Who are we looking at here? Oh, it's supposed to be of a baby T Rex. Is this like off of the um, juvenile skeleton I think they found a few years back, possibly over in Montana? So, this is very likely a T Rex. Well,
Well, that's weird because it says Dave Hone's Archosaur Musing? Mussing?
well, that's just a website.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Archosaur refers to um, the lineage of reptiles in which every single species of dinosaur and present day bird belongs to, as well as the different lineages of crocodilomorphs or the pseudosuchians, which would include today's crocodilians. The lizards of today, as well as even back in the earlier Cenozoic era or the time of mammals and the Mesozoic era, were not part of Archosauromorpha. And the same would go for most of the marine reptiles as well. They were of a completely different lineage of um, reptiles.
Okay, I found a baby.
Something from Asia. Well, anyway, yeah, he's got issues. I'm not just saying in his overall physique, but his personality too. There's something very off. Um, especially with his teeth sticking out like that. Oh yeah, and you also should not have it where the T-Rex's arms are very stiff and also specifically facing towards the ground, which they would be in this instance. T-Rex likely had it where the claws, which it basically had, or its fingers, the thumb and the index finger would be facing towards each other slightly.
Wait, I got another baby.
They would not be able to, however, connect with each other. Yeah, he's got even more issues. He has 3 fingers. However, there is a species or there is a specimen of a T-Rex named Y-Rex. So we have discovered from Montana. I think it was back in the early 2000s or the end of the 1990s that has a 3rd finger or essentially a small middle finger. So that is quite unique among every single species or every specimen of a T-Rex that we have discovered. And you could say the same for most species of tyrannosaurs. There were a handful that did have over 3 fingers. That was much earlier in their evolution. By late Cretaceous, they all had only 2 fingers, unless they were just born with some odd genetic like Y-Rex. It was close to the same size as um, many other T Rex specimens that have been discovered. Unfortunately, though, Y-Rex um, was discovered with only having half of a tail. The interesting thing is when paleontologists like Dr. Philip Manning from Manchester checked the back of the tail, apparently he found bite marks, and these bite marks were also showing indications that the animal had healed. So this seems to put more evidence into animals or predatory carnivores. I know it was redundant, but like T Rex existing in packs. So it's very possible that this animal had a mate and it helped take care of it, as well as possibly its own even young. Since it probably took somewhere between 20 to 30 years for T Rex to reach full growth and possibly still continue to grow throughout its life. Um, it just at a much slower rate. This is a bit better or much closer to the accurate specimen of T Rex. It likely was not covered in feathers when it was full grown, and that even came to like small bits of feathers, kind of like what was shown on the like Jurassic World Dominion model for the animal, at least the beginning of the movie. There is not really any evidence for T Rex having feathers, even when full grown. Of the skin fragments, well, we've found massive skin fragments from T Rex that have been discovered. They seem to be very plain when it comes to showing any indication of plumage or feathers being on the animal. This is still a bit of a debate, however, with its plant eater contemporaries such as Triceratops, which possibly might have had like porcupine quill like feathers protruding out of certain regions of their skin. We have found a tremendous amount of Triceratops skin. Um,
I haven't seen this.
no, I haven't either. I think the fingers might be a bit long compared to their body size. T Rex had very small fingers, different from like the Abelisaurs, which would have roamed different parts of South America, Africa, and even Asia, but they never came into contact with T Rex. It's possible they did come into contact with certain um, other smaller species of Tyrannosaur, but not T Rex itself. But they really weren't in many cases much longer than just people's fingers, depending on the person, even shorter in length. But they had very robust arms compared to, like, the arms body size.
These guys just look happy.
Oh, yeah, so this is a picture from paleo artist Charles R. Knight, I think from, like, the 1940s or 1950s. It's a very good reconstruction of a T-Rex and a Triceratops in Lake Cretaceous, Montana. However, the animal in the background should not be erected in that position, but,
You
it
mean
is interesting
you mean
because
a good representation for the time it was done?
well, I was just saying for today's reconstruction of the animals, they should all have, at least when it comes to the theropods, more of a horizontal sort of um, stance. And in just at this time, I think it was around the 1970s to 1980s when we started seeing a big change with how the dinosaurs, especially the theropods, and how their stature was changed. But at this point, I mean, with what we're seeing with the animal in front, this is quite um it's quite a change for the time. I mean, the animal in the background is really the average sort of look for a wide variety, pretty much every species of theropod dinosaur during the early 1900s. The Triceratops also having its tail on the ground, that would not have occurred. But putting that aside, it is a tremendously well depicted Triceratops individual. I mean, beside maybe missing certain feathers like along the back, and maybe the horns along the frill being a bit more protruding. You can almost like barely notice that there are distinct horns along the frill. Also it seems that the jaw in general might be a bit long for a triceratops, but it's really not bad.
I didn't
Um,
realize he kinda looks like a bird.
yeah. And well, the interesting thing is that in this case, T Rex is much more closely related to birds than Triceratops is. That is because the Saurischian lineage of dinosaurs would also host the birds as well. The Ornithischian lineage of dinosaurs would not host the birds. And that's also making the ceratopsians, the hadrosaurs or the guanodontids, the stegosaurs, and chylosauromorphs being much more distantly related to the birds compared to the theropods and the long-necked sauropods like Brontosaurus, Brachiosaurus. This is a toy.
Oh,
So are the ones in the background too.
for those of you
Um,
wondering, I'm picking all the pictures.
uh, what was it?
Okay, I don't know what this is.
I think they also based that model off of like the last scene in Jurassic Park. Oh, yeah, this came out. Oh gosh, I forgot the paleo artist, but I think this was possibly based on a new species of Tyrannosaur, or was it something on Nanotyrannus? It could be Nanotyrannus in the towards the left, or it's a baby T Rex, but I don't know. Something about that says it could be just a Nanotyrannus. They just decided to stick it in the depiction. So he seems to be hunting a smaller ornithomimid, it seems. But Nanotyrannus has been known as its own distinct genus since it seems like probably around 1988 by Dr. Robert T. Bacher and a paleontologist from Alberta, Canada, Philip J. Curry, which has been part of several theories and discoveries of different species of tyrannosaurs over in Alberta, Canada, as well as different species of hadrosaurs and ceratopsians. He's also covered different species from the Jurassic and Triassic as well. But um, what was it? Oh, it seems that I think it was like Charles W. Gilmore that discovered Nanotyrannus back in, I believe, 1910. And then it wasn't until the 1980s that there was actually um, a lot more or thorough analysis done on the animal. I think it was named also its own distinct Tyrannosaurus by chance. Um, I'll have to double check that with the original
I
discovery.
forgot, who was it that said that T-Rex was just a scavenger?
Oh, right. Yeah. I don't know why Jack Horner, specifically the former Jurassic Park paleontological advisor, um, for decades was putting up he still does, the theory that T-Rex was just a scavenger. Considering this animal would need a tremendous amount of food for its body size. It's a warm-blooded individual. It's constantly on the move. It's alert. It's having to watch out not just for other T-Rex trying to intrude on its own family, but, for or trying to watch out for the ankylosaurs and especially the other ceratopsians or the herbivores in the region, which also want to destroy, its own lineage itself. And also the same thing would go for, simply, like, if a dry season is occurring, um, how plentiful are the other herbivores in the landscape? There's a lot this animal is having to process. So, in order to process all of that, information and to keep its body and brain well functioning, it needs a steady supply of food. So, this animal was likely eating every single day. Um, yeah, a Tyrannosaurus is likely not going to come this close to a Triceratops, especially if it's a healthy individual or it's, even in this case, slightly injured. It's going to keep quite a far distance. Now, hunting in a pack is still going to help, but Triceratops is probably one of the most dangerous land animals to exist. So, um, it probably would have taken somewhere between 2 to 3 T-Rex to successfully bring down a Triceratops, a healthy one. If it's sick or depending on how injured it is, or it's just simply a much older individual, then it's possible that one T-Rex could take it out, even if it's at, like, full size. But, just a healthy individual, that would probably not be the case. If it's going after a T-Rex is hunting different species of hadrosaurs, which even then we have evidence for not every time a T-Rex hunted a hadrosaur, like in Montosaurus, was it successful. Um, well, even in this case, this seems to be, a bit, um, like seems to be the Triceratops is going pretty easy on the Tyrannosaur. But in many cases, the Triceratops, if it really had the ability to fully puncture a T-Rex, it would just make sure that it finished it.
I've
And also, this seems like a very skinny Triceratops. Now, Triceratops, what were you going to say?
A lot of the time, I think they make it out that T-Rex can take out a Triceratops all the time.
Yeah, that was the case with many, not just I'd say movies, but there weren't really many movies where T-Rex was depicted going after Triceratops. I'd say it might occur in certain documentaries, but it was, yeah, fairly hard. I mean, even for a younger Triceratops, depending on how large it was. Also, these animals likely lived in small herds, kind of like southern white rhinos do today. But probably, I mean, they're not existing today, so when it comes to the full-on interpretations, a bit challenging, but, they probably were likely much more aggressive compared to, white rhinos today. I think the reason why white rhinos today are a bit more skittish and are not very aggressive towards other species is because they really don't have any major quadrupedal predators. Um Humans are bipedal. But when it comes to, lions, hyenas, leopards, they're not too concerned about them unless bipedal animal decided to help with poaching and cut off its major defense mechanism, and that can make them more appealing to the lions and hyenas, but really lions. Anyway, putting that aside, um, the Triceratops, I just think in this instance would be very aggressive, considering it's dealing with probably the most dangerous land animal to exist when it comes to carnivory. Oh yeah, this is also an illustration. It's by one of Dr. Robert T. Bacher's books. Off if the Rex like slowly beats when it's fighting Triceratops, it has a major problem. Now, I think what is also funny is the crocodilomorphs in this instance. These are not crocodiles or alligators of today. They're probably a species called not Borealisuchus. Who
I
is that
see a
specifically?
crocodile oh, on the bottom of it.
Yeah, there are a handful of different crocodilomorph species. Some actually quite large compared to even today's that existed with T Rex. There's one species. It's reached, I think, somewhere around 25 to 30 feet in length, or around 7.5 to 9 meters. It probably weighed somewhere around 1 to 2 tons. And younger T Rex probably had to be careful with coming into contact with that specific species, even with other Borealisuchus around. But Borealisuchus, it seems, probably around the size of a saltwater crocodile or maybe an American crocodile. So pushing probably around 20 feet or 6 meters and maybe weighing between 1,600 to 2,000 pounds or a little over, um, maybe 800 to 900 kilograms. But aside from the crocodilomorphs,
Yeah, most pictures are the T-Rex taking down the Triceratops.
which definitely would have happened occasionally, but this is, yeah, the Triceratops would have probably squished to an extent the T Rex because Triceratops likely on average was heavier than T Rex. It's very possible Triceratops could weigh up to 15 tons. A very large individual, but certainly is possible. And this animal also has a tremendously large skull compared to most other species of dinosaurs. It's not necessarily the length of certain other members of the Chasmosaur lineage, like Torosaurus, Pentaceratops, or other Pentaceratops species, Navajoceratops, but it's extremely robust. It's very possible T-Rex probably couldn't bite through the frill of a Triceratops, is how reinforced that animal's skull was, or at least the back part. Um, oh yeah, also that T-Rex in the other depiction was a bit thin. Yeah, that one too. Or what was I going out with that? Um, Yeah, so likely even when it came to the ankylosaurs, T-Rex was probably hunting them occasionally, but it would still be quite challenging. Considering the animal was very short and it's very heavily armored, at least when referring to ankylosaurs. But no, you know what? Let's bring up an ankylosaurus.
Oh, okay.
Ankyllo.
Okay, your favorite first?
Well, since because I think most times this picture pops up, we're talking about nodosaurs, which are a completely different lineage of ankylosaur morphs. Ankylosaurus is a true member of Ankylosauridae, um, and it is also an ankylosaur morph, but the nodosaurs are a completely different lineage. They're also much more lightly built. They did still continue until the end of the Mesozoic era around 66 million years ago, but they didn't have the wider, more robust jaw structure of the ankylosaurs or members of Ankylosauridae. And they also, in many cases, didn't really have the protruding horns towards the sides of their skull like the ankylosaurs.
Okay, this looks like
Yeah.
he's waiting for them to come up so he can smack them.
Yeah, it does seem that way, and that probably would have been the case in many instances. It sort of shows that even these animals, which are usually depicted as being quite unintelligent, were very smart for 67 million years ago and even prior. So, Also, when it comes to the nodosaurs, there doesn't seem to be any evidence for these animals consisting of club tails, whereas it seems to be for nearly every species of Ankylosauridae, they had a club tail. But this specific species seems to, at least this depiction,
What is it supposed to be?
I think it's a Tarchia from Mongolia. Tarchia would have existed somewhere around 70 to 71 million years ago in the late Cretaceous, but Ankylosaurus won't evolve until somewhere around 68 million years ago
Wait, did you
over
say
in
it's
North
from
America.
Mongolia?
Yes, possibly even northern China. It's found in the Gobi Desert, I believe, like back in the 1920s, possibly part of the Roy Chapman Andrews expedition, but I'll have to double check that. Roy Chapman Andrews found a wide range of different species of animals, such as Velociraptor, Protoceratops, even certain species of prehistoric mammals, like I believe from the Oligocene epoch,
What's this thing supposed to be?
about 23 to 34 million years ago. This is like supposed to represent one of the older reconstructions slightly of Ankylosaurus, where they gave it a much more vertical sort of stature when it comes to the core of the animal. And the horns are also very large compared to the animal's skull size. This should be much shorter, but also a bit broader and more of like a um, realistic ankylosaur horn look. So, I mean, the animal in the background is a bit better when it comes to the interpretation, but it's still a bit tall. Ankylosaurus had a bit more of like a flat sort of a structure. And that's also the problem with the other earlier models is that so far they seem to be too tall. The animal was quite wide, but it wasn't necessarily like tall and fat. It also doesn't seem that these animals likely would have carried any fat on them, considering they lived in quite a warm climate. Now, there was a point back in the Cretaceous, especially around 75 million years ago, different parts of Canada, likely even Asia, maybe even over in Australia and Antarctica, go further back even to the early Cretaceous, they possibly did carry some fat on them, considering there is massive evidence for temperatures to have dropped and there was definitely snow accumulation and also for certain extended periods. So they did have like a 4 season um, occurrence, not like the typical or stereotype dry season and wet season that is much more common in different parts of the Mesozoic. But technically, the cooler events still occurred in pretty much every period, probably less so in the Jurassic, but it
This
definitely is present in the Triassic.
this guy reminds me of the reflection you get from an oyster shell.
Um, yeah, he's also quite tall when it comes to the reconstruction. I think it could be an Ankylosaurus or it's another closely related species. His tail club, however, there's something different about it. Like it doesn't exactly have a I mean, it does look similar to an Ankylosaurus, but it's also something else. I don't think it's a Tarchia. There seem to be hadrosaurs in the background, but because this is a bit challenging to recognize, I don't know whose hadrosaurs could be. I mean, we could be over in some part of Asia, maybe even Canada. This is definitely not the earlier Euoplocephalus from Alberta, Canada, which existed in North America about 74 million years ago. It could be Ankylosaurus. This guy has issues. This is the Jurassic World Ankylosaur model.
Oh, really?
Yes, and Ankylosaurus did not have elongated spike osteoderms like its earlier relatives of different species. Well, certain earlier species of nodosaurs would have contained. This is more of a nodosaur trait. Even along the tail, you can see the spike accumulations. Um, really, the most accurate part of the animal is probably the skull. It's not bad. I think the beak could possibly be slightly dull, like a bit duller in um, well, maybe it's also specifically the bottom beak that's annoying me. And also, like, the specific, like, horn, um, characteristic, like, just before the beak as well. There's something off about the front of the snout in general. It also seems that there is evidence for like the preserved skin found like adjacent to where the eyelid would be, indicating that the animal might have had armored eyelids, which is it just shows how heavily armored this animal was. This one's a bit tall compared to most ankylosaurs. Their body was quite situated low to the ground and not up in the air like other lineages of dinosaurs. It is quite astounding. Actually, this is a bit similar to almost a stegosaur in some ways. But that what on earth? That tail club has extra osteoderms surrounding it. What is interesting is that there is a lineage of dinosaurs that did have a tail club somewhat like this, but still different, being certain earlier short sauropods from the Jurassic, like the Shanosaurus. But they had more protruding, sort of like thagomizers, like the stegosaur spikes on their tail club. But this is fairly off. Um, Even when it comes to the horns along the back of the skull of this animal, they're quite it's almost like somebody looked at some depiction of a dragon and decided to stick it on there. It's definitely got major issues. Um, the snout might be a bit large, but ankylosaurs didn't necessarily have small nostrils either. Hmm. Yeah, I think when it comes to the front legs and hind legs of ankylosaurs in general, they were actually quite similar in size, though the forelimbs would be overall shorter. If you're looking at certain species of nodosaurs like Denvosaurus, which was found adjacent to Denver, Colorado, um, they tend to have much smaller forelimbs compared to their hind limbs, which is odd and probably didn't help them with speed. That tends to indicate a pretty slow animal, kind of like the stegosaurs. Well, moving a bit further back in time into the Mesozoic, if this is um okay. Yeah, this is specifically him. This is one of the earlier great uncles of Tyrannosaurus rex. This is not a direct ancestor because this lineage would disappear into the early Cretaceous around somewhere between 120 and 130 million years ago. This is a member of the Proceratosauridae lineage of Tyrannosauroideae, being this animal is Proceratosaurus. It is not, however, necessarily closely related to Ceratosaurus, the um the other theropod that used to inhabit the Jurassic of North America, as well as yeah, I'm going to leave him specifically there. So, so staying on this Tyrannosaur, this animal is from Europe and pushing somewhere around 163 to 165 million years ago on the continent. And Proceratosaurus was also it's a huge debate as to the size of this animal. It could be somewhere around 8 feet in length and maybe let me phrase that. 6 to 8 feet in length. They're pushing somewhere between 2 to 2.4 meters and maybe weighing somewhere around 70 to 80 pounds or probably around 35 kilograms. And then there are estimates of this animal probably reaching um, a bit over 8 to 10 feet in length. They're pushing around 3 meters and probably weighing more than 220 pounds or around 110 kilograms. So this is one of the size depictions of the animal. This is definitely on the smaller spectrum. But Proceratosaurus, what is interesting is that there is evidence for this animal having a much larger crest on the top of its head, like many earlier species of smaller or even medium-sized theropod dinosaurs.
What happened to this guy?
Um,
Someone bite his nose?
yeah, that's what they're depicting. I think it's a really good reconstruction. They're definitely giving him also as a blind eye, I think.
Oh god.
Very
He's beat up.
yeah. He's definitely had a very aggressive lifestyle. Oh, so this animal is from Gloucestershire, England, around 164 million years ago. So one of the first species of tyrannosaurs to exist. So it is also a member of Proceratosauridae, not Tyrannosauridae, which wouldn't evolve until slightly later into the Tyrannosaurus lineage. So, there was an even earlier species of Tyrannosaur that existed called Kylescus. And it, however, is from Russia around 166 to about 166 million years ago. Seems to be the earliest species of Tyrannosaur that we know of. Probably around the size of the smaller Proceratosaur depiction that I mentioned, somewhere around maybe like 50 to 80 pounds or around maybe 25 to 35 kilograms and maybe reaching somewhere around 4 feet in length or maybe 1.2 meters. It is small, but it's also one of the first tyrannosaurs. So it's a huge step in evolution. It's that Jurassic World evolution model.
Wait,
For Proceratosaurus, it's okay. It's really not bad. Proceratosaurus, also because of its size, it likely had a certain amount of plumage. That seems to be the case with many species of earlier tyrannosaurs in general. Also, very likely is that this animal had or was feeding on smaller species of dinosaurs, even likely going after smaller species of reptiles, amphibians, maybe even certain terrestrial crocodilomorphs in the region. Um,
and once again,
yeah, this megalosaur is like, hey, you're talking about England. You got to mention me. So this is Megalosaurus, the first confirmed species of carnivorous dinosaur to have been discovered from England. Um, the animal was reaching probably around 30 feet or 9 meters and somewhere around 2 to 3 tons.
which comes up on almost everything I search for.
Yeah, he wants to make sure that scientists like Richard Owen, William Buckland are always renowned, which I mean, I agree with. But, they helped name this specific, creature. Also, he wants to represent the Megalosauridae lineage as well. He's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I know you are talking about Saurolosaurs, but you gotta mention the Megalosaurs." Well, I mentioned technically the Allosaurs as well. Maybe did I much earlier?
No.
Yeah, I did. I mentioned a Carcharodontosaur, I think, earlier on, like, with Spinosaurus. And so he's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You can't segregate us. We're dinosaurs. This is." Okay, sometimes I do. Anyway, focusing on this Proceratosaurus. Um, okay, where about? Oh, okay. So this is one of the older reconstructions. So, this animal, at least when it comes to the overall jaw structure, it possibly came into contact with bone. At least when it comes to just the sheer durability of its teeth, but it likely was just focusing on the softer flesh regions of the animals that it fed on, but it also was feeding on likely smaller, less armored dinosaurs compared to later members of the Tyrannosaur lineage. So, probably hunting, probably sauropod hatchlings, maybe even animals like the Cetiosaurus, but it's also possible Cetiosaurus probably went extinct at this point in England, which was a 50 to 60 foot long or a 15-meter to 18-meter long sauropod dinosaur that roamed England around 170 million years ago, along with animals like Megalosaurus. Okay, this is even later into the Cretaceous. So we have now left the Jurassic of England. Um, where was I getting at? Oh, so this is D Long. This is around 125 to 130 million years ago over in China. This belongs to a lineage of tyrannosaurs that likely would evolve into T Rex itself, as well as like Albertosaurus, Tarbosaurus, Gorgosaurus. Let's see, who else? There's also Guanlong, a closely related species, but Guanlong, it seems, came a bit earlier compared to Dilong. So Dilong is a descendant. But when it comes to Dilong, this animal was probably not much more than 4 to 6 feet in length, or pushing somewhere around 1.2 meters to maybe around 1.8 meters, and was likely feeding on smaller reptiles and amphibians like Proceratosaurus, but also likely feeding on just smaller dinosaurs in general. Now, this animal also is probably covered on or with a wide variety of different feathers. Well, it does seem to be that the Tyrannosaurs, probably in general, at least that's a theory, that they had a very similar plumage, especially with the smaller species. But it also seems to be probably with the larger Tyrannosaurs as well, just when it came to the hatchlings.
This looks like they're supposed to be chasing him, but they're not looking at him.
Yeah, it could be maybe they're supposed to depict a certain volcanic eruption, considering depending on what time you were roaming China, or there's at least certain species of dinosaurs, or wherever your mammalian ancestors were. Certain volcanic eruptions were occurring, so that possibly is what's going on, or they just missed. No, I think that's just possibly rocks in the background.
Okay, here's what
I think
AI
it's a
did.
really good painting, though. Well, here we are over. I guess that's supposed to be too long. Very confusing. He looks like he's it's like situated between a dromaeosaur and some other lineage of mysterious theropods. It's not hitting me at the moment. And there's an older ceratopsian relative. So an older um, uncle of Triceratops.
Well,
And not also belonging to the exact same family. Considering Triceratops was ceratopsid, but this animal was not. It was just a basal ceratopsian. Whoa, okay, so this is definitely giving possibly D Long a very um,
I don't know.
he's very hungry, is all I can say.
The mammals look good, but I don't know what I'm looking at with him.
It is interesting with these earlier, they could be like a certain type of marsupial. I mean, the mammals in during the Cretaceous didn't really reach much more than 30 or 35 pounds, or a little over 15 kilograms. And it is interesting how, in this case, they give it like an Australian brush-tailed possum sort of a accumulation. I like the brush-tailed possums, but um, yeah, very likely they were just feeding on different species of insects. Certain species, it does seem that there is evidence for them hunting certain smaller dinosaur hatchlings. So occasionally they did have somewhat revenge. But for the most part, our ancestors were just simply hiding in the trees or underground. In most cases, it would have benefited them. But there are certain instances where there is evidence for certain types of dinosaurs to have burrowed, but it just seems to be a certain species of herbivores, like smaller ornithopods. So likely the mammals might have just spared them, or well, the iguanodontids or the ornithopods spared them. Well, this is interesting. Haven't seen this before. He's carrying one of those poor possums in his mouth. Um, I mean, besides that, I think the problem is it's just the overall DeLong's skull morphology in this instance. It also seems like the back of his bottom part of the back of the bottom jaw seems to be like pushed to the side of it. Anyway,
Okay, this is interesting. This is listed under D-Long, but then it's not.
yeah, this is I think supposed to be a T-Rex hunting Struthiomimus. Problem is it's showing the rib cage. That wouldn't have been the instance unless the animal was truly starving. And I think for the time, it was like late 2010s or so. I don't know, it might have popped up earlier. It wasn't a bad reconstruction. These days, though, it should have a bit more of like an elongated snout, but still not a bad depiction of a T-Rex. Those Struthiomimus are pretty good. Oh, wow. This is supposed to be, yeah, T Long, maybe a younger individual. They're giving him a very long snout. Interesting. Almost like a dromaeosaur or a not a megaraptor, but maybe an ostroraptor to an extent. Oh, you know what it does remind me of to an extent? Coelophysid. That's what it somewhat resembles. So the arms are definitely much longer compared to its body size than Coelophysid. For some reason, Coelophysid, especially the smaller species, had somewhat smaller arms. But also just covering this animal in plumage or feathers.
Okay, can you tell by this AI what this is supposed to be
I think it's a good life size model.
without reading it?
Okay. It's a Megaraptorid, at least in overall reconstruction, it seems. Um, hmm. Maybe something like a Deltadromeus. It's a bit of a um, debate as to what that specific theropod from late Cretaceous Africa would have belonged to. Okay, well,
See what it says?
Electrosaurus. Yeah, this is pretty far off for an Electrosaurus. I mean, the closest thing, maybe the legs. Electrosaurus is a species of earlier Tyrannosaur, but much later. It's a descendant of Dilong, inhabiting Mongolia and especially the Gobi Desert area, which consists of a wide range of Mongolia, a sliver of north central China, around 90 million years ago during the early late Cretaceous, and was likely feeding on some of the smaller ceratopsians in the region, coexisted with giant kygnathed oviraptor like theropod dinosaurs. And I think there were certain other hadrosauromorphs in the region too. But when it comes to the legs and the skull is somewhere between a tyrannosaur and a megaraptorid. The tyrannosaurs and the megaraptors were related or closely related, but still distinct lineages of the Coelurosaur family. Huh. Well, interesting. They're also giving him a very. I wonder if it's changed. Seems to have changed a bit for the reconstruction of Electrosaurus's skull, because I think with certain other reconstructions, I was just recognizing it as being a bit more just later Tyrannosaur like in structure.
Okay, this one's kinda blurry, but
But he is kind of thin, or at least very. I wouldn't say necessarily even lean, just very uh, almost skinny in some instances. Well, if this is an order Electrosaurus, I guess from the 1960s, possibly. This is definitely that very vertical like stature for different 1960s theropod
oh, wait a minute.
versions.
Hold on. I got a better one from
I was saying, oh, I think from before when it came to that
here.
Megalosaurus. Oh, okay. Well, that's better when it comes to the overall coloration. Some more life to it, except for the barren landscape. Yeah, I also noticed when it comes to a lot of older depictions of dinosaurs, they're either depicted as being in like a swamp or a bit of a marsh, which I think can be in many cases in different people's minds, or they're in like a very dry and barren landscape, which really wasn't the traditional look. Like it was usually sort of like swamps or certain dense, maybe woodland, like a mountainous, jungly sort of aspect to it.
Where were they supposed to be getting their food?
Well, that was the thing, and all of a sudden you had it where I think in the 1960s, 70s, even 80s to a smaller extent, a bunch of dinosaurs are being depicted as being in like a sort of barren landscape, like bits of vegetation here and there, and you're wondering how the herbivores are fueling themselves. Um,
Yeah,
and
but
this
they
is
they
one of
did
those
that what was
instances.
that, documentary
Prehistoric Planet
where they had the sauropods in
recently.
the desert
Yeah,
next to a
that's
volcano?
they likely would have come upon certain deserts. They did exist during the Mesozoic era. You could have had it where in different dry seasons or certain intense droughts would have occurred, but not consistently. And also, you would have had to have had vegetation somewhere or a certain type of flourishing ecosystem for the animals to fuel themselves.
Wait, here we go again.
Okay, it's because this animal is like, no, 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 you need to explain. Um, okay, the both the Tyrannosaurs or the Coelurosaurs, the large broader group that they belong to, the Allosaurs, so the group of dinosaurs that would have consisted of the Carcharodontosaurs, Allosaurus, um, as well as the Ceratosaurians and the that would consist of animals like Ceratosaurus, Sultriovenator, and the Megalosaurs, which would consisted of animals such as Megalosaurus, Spinosaurus, Torvosaurus, all belong to the Avatheropoda lineage of theropod dinosaurs, and even the Avatheropods belong to the Neotheropoda lineage of dinosaurs
But why does he keep ending up in everything?
because he feels like he has been,
Left out?
yeah, pushed away. Um, yeah, well, it is interesting because I don't think it was maybe as recognizable at first, but this is from Planet Dinosaur. It's just a very blurry image of the scene of two electrosaurs over in Lake Cretaceous, Mongolia. And they definitely have a very, well, somewhat distinct sort of skull morphology compared to certain other tyrannosaurs, but you could also possibly confuse their skull model with maybe just a younger Gorgosaurus or another species of later tyrannosaurs. So
Wait, someone drew one.
this looks more of like a, no, it's still different. I was gonna say Neotyrannus, but it's got its own thing. Even the upper jaw, it's different. Um, yeah, and even the overall physique in general. Yeah, this animal has more of like a skinny sort of a sort of depiction to it. Um,
This guy
but
looks like he's dying of mange or something.
he does, or like somebody plucked him. I'm not entirely sure, but when it comes to Electrosaurus, I don't think I mentioned the size of this animal. It was a smaller Tyrannosaur. I mean, for the time, it wasn't bad, but 14 to maybe 18 feet in length. That's pushing it, or somewhere around 4.2 to or maybe 4.4,
Is this an Electrosaurus?
around 5 meters, 5.5 meters. Yes, it's an older reconstruction. Comes from some book. I don't remember which one it was. I think it's from the 1990s, possibly. But um, also probably not weighing much more than 1,700 pounds. It's probably a large individual or pushing. Somewhere around maybe 800 kilograms. Let's see. This one, I mean, he was definitely giving him a lot more size. Okay, let's see. Oh, whoa, this is definitely a much heavier individual. I also forgot who specifically made this kind of a model.
And incredibly feathered.
Well, not just feathered, like he is definitely like a lot more muscle was added to this animal. Probably a little too robust, even when it came to the upper jaw. It comes to the upper jaw. Also, it is interesting. It's like a bit more of like a not an Albertosaurus, more of like the horn accumulation was giving that sort of a look, but um, maybe maybe a Gorgosaurus, possibly like that other model from Planet Dinosaur. Not it's somewhat resembles an Electrosaurus, but it is different. It is interesting when it comes to the feather accumulation. It's like he's wearing a cape.
I didn't think about that. Okay, let me.
Yeah, that guy was definitely fairly off. Not the one with the mammals chasing it, but the other. To the big
That
one.
one's just freaky.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I still think it looks good, but he can't tell if he was just eating something or that's what they're trying to depict. Now, what is interesting is that I think they are depicting this animal as having lips, but they're just making out like he's gone through such such a rough hunting experience that, well, not just hunting, probably defending territory, maybe even mates. It is a big question with earlier tyrannosaurs. Did they also have a family structure like their descendants? I think it's very possible. You definitely, it seems to be that way with certain even earlier species of the avitheropods, like back in the Triassic or even the early Jurassic. I think this is supposed to be Nanotyrannus, possibly going after a maybe a young T Rex in this instance.
And he's hoping that the parents don't show up.
Yeah, very true, but he likely could just quickly run away. This animal was much quicker than T-Rex. It's not going to fight. a full-grown individual, most likely. Um, like Jurassic Fight Club tried to or did depict. But putting that aside, so Nanotyrannus is a species of Tyrannosaur that existed over in Montana around 67 million years ago, so coexisting with T Rex, as well as Triceratops and Kylosaurus. And this animal um, likely reached somewhere around, I think, 14 to 20 feet in length. So it was a smaller species of Tyrannosaur, pushing around maybe 4.2 to 6 meters. Probably only weighed maybe, well, there's a wide variety of debate when it comes to the size of Nanotyrannus. There have been instances where the animal might not have weighed much more than 1,000 to 1,200 pounds, or around 500 to 550 kilograms, or pushing somewhere between 2 to 3,000 pounds, or right around 900 to maybe 1,400 kilograms.
So that's about a third of the size of T-Rex.
No, much smaller. T Rex was like somewhere between 9 to 11 tons. So,
Oh, I was
um,
confusing tons in my head with pounds.
yeah, maybe he was. It's not hitting me at the moment.
I can't
Oh,
tell if these are AI or
it's somebody's model. It's from a little way back. It's definitely a confused T Rex in the distance, and
Yeah, I just saw that. He looks like, "What are you doing?"
it's almost like, yeah, this is supposed to be like maybe Nanotyrannus parents, or it's one of the older descendants of this Nanotyrannus um, father and mother over here. And there's the younger Nanotyrannus, and he's got a facial expression like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you're the one that lured the T Rex over here. He's like, um,
It is
the other one just
funny.
looks guilty.
I mean, once you said that, I'm just staring at the facial expressions on those 2. Eh, but
Yeah,
it's the hold on.
they've got very distinct facial. Everybody here has
Wait.
distinct facial expressions, except for the as dark as
Yeah,
up
this is
top.
just funny.
Yeah.
Where are you? There you are. It looks like it's smiling going, "Uh-huh. Hey, the food showed up."
Well, smiling or concerned about the argument outcome.
Wait, did I oops.
I think those were Quetzalcoatlus up at the top of the painting. Of course. This does not really look like a Neotyrannus. It also has 3 claws. Um, but also a rib cage exposing. And then there's the blurry side picture. Almost looks like it took like a sliver of a Jurassic World Gallimimus and just stuck it on there. But besides that, this, I'm not sure what I would refer this to. Maybe some member of the um, Allosaur lineage, possibly. But outside of that, yeah, even the arms, or not the arms, the legs are a bit off. Like they're too long compared to its body size for it to be an Allosaur. That is a Nanotyrannus skull. Yeah, it's very yeah, it's an exquisite model. I
Is it
mean,
real?
um, possibly. Um, Now, yeah, there definitely is a lot of difference when it comes to the skull structure of this animal and as opposed to a T Rex individual. But
Well, we've definitely found a whole one.
um, what are you looking? Oh well, mentioning another Nanotyrannus specimen, we have found one being locked
Bloody
into.
Bloody Mary?
Yeah, I think that's her. Being in contact with a species of ceratopsian from the late Cretaceous of Montana or South Dakota. I think it was back in the early 2010s when it first showed up. You had it where like Peter Larson, a paleontologist from the Black Hills Institute in South Dakota, and Robert T. Bacher. I think there were a wide variety of other paleontologists that um, originally went to see and observe the specimen. Uh, hmm. He's got a bit of a broad jaw structure for now Tyrannus, in my opinion. Now, what is interesting is that they're giving him like a lemur or Maybe a howler monkey-like tail? That's a bit off. Oh, you know what it could be? Maybe like a coati or a coatimundi, sort of, look. So, like, the coati is the species of mammal that inhabits different parts of southern Arizona, New Mexico, and into virtually all of most of Mexico, different parts of Central America. Well, there are different species down in South America, but it has a somewhat similar tail. And no, they don't use it to latch onto trees.
That would be funny.
Neither did Nanotyrannus. But aside from that, I think this is an interesting model. It definitely added quite a bit of robustness to the arms, though the claws seem fairly matched in overall length and even diameter for like the rest of the forearm, the upper arm as well, even the shoulder blade.
Oh, I like this.
Since Neotyrannus was a smaller species of Tyrannosaur, it's very possible the animal was covered in feathers. Oh yeah, this is from one of those National Geographic documentaries, which had too little CGI for the documentary. It was one of those documentaries that consistently reran the same scenes over. Um, yeah, just repeatedly, um, repeatedly.
Repetitively?
Yeah, okay, yeah, repetitively. But, another issue is that this animal does not have lips. I think the documentary came out, like, back in 2013 or 2014, and, um, though the rest of the morphology of the animal, I think, looks good. I mean, it's really not bad for a Neotyrannus. They just stuck the feathers on, like, towards the back. Well, actually, that is odd. They stuck it directly on the back of the neck, and I'm guessing along, like, even the back, which is almost like looking at the, um, spike-like osteoderms that you see on different species of long-necked sauropods like the diplodocids, but they just did this with the feathers. That wasn't hitting me. That's odd.
I feel like I'm looking at claymation.
Yeah, I guess sort of, but this is one of those, seems early 2010s, um, depictions of like a wide variety of dinosaurs, and with this now Tyrannus, it's fairly off. Even for a T-Rex, I can't think of really any species of dinosaur, Tyrannosaur specifically, that would have this type of a look. There were flowers back in the Cretaceous period, but besides that, he I don't know who he would have matched with. Oh, I forgot about that painting. I think we saw it and then for some reason just kept going. Yeah, I think the overall ecosystems look quite realistic when it comes to like the open floodplains, the marshes.
This guy's kinda small.
Oh, okay. This individual, Raptor Rex. So I believe the original specimens were discovered at some point in the early 1900s, but there was a wide range of debate for this animal and as to like what specific tyrannosaur it could be a member of. So, if you were to fast forward to today or 2026, it seems to be that Raptor Rex does not exist due to a wide range of um, different skeletal issues that actually correlate with or they do correlate with younger Tarbosaurus juveniles. So it seems to be that this is essentially or well, it hasn't really been put out there yet, but seems to be just a younger Tarbosaurus, Batar. Batar being the species of Tarbosaurus. So
So they identified something that
there were a handful of different species of Tyrannosaurs or even genre that were put up for this animal, and then Raptor Rex was somewhat agreed upon. There was still major debate, and now it seems to be it's just a young Tarbosaurus. So, when it comes to the Tarbosaurus and that depiction, that might not be far off. This animal, however, has issues. He has 3 fingers. He should only have 2. Now, for a younger Tarbosaur, the arms might be okay, but even then, they seem a bit large.
And he's chasing a ceratopsian?
Well, he's chasing a Cetacosaurus, which went extinct. Likely, it's a Cetacosaurus. Seems pretty similar. He is in the air. These animals probably jumped occasionally, but they existed over in China about 113 million years ago during the early Cretaceous. Tarbosaurus wouldn't evolve until somewhere around 71 million years ago, towards the last 6 million years of the Cretaceous period. So the two never came into contact with each other. Also,
You want me to skip him, though?
um, yeah, I guess let's call it with Raptor Rex because he's an invalid genus. Forgot, is this supposed to? Oh, it's D-Long. Kept thinking it was Proceratosaurus. Um, so I'm
Okay,
guessing did you bring up Zhusheng Tyrannus or Tarbosaurus?
Tarbosaurus.
Oh, okay. Well, Zhusheng Tyrannus and Tarbosaurus did live in close proximity to each other. I think one of the streams way back might have said Zhusheng Tyrannus lived back in the early Cretaceous, like 120 million years ago. No, they actually nearly coexisted with each other, but technically Zhusheng Tyrannus came slightly earlier, about 75 million years ago. It's around the same time as Albertosaurus over in Canada.
Why does this look like a T-Rex?
Tarbosaurus was originally named Tyrannosaurus, I think Batar, but there has been a lot of, or there was a lot more analysis um, inferred onto the different, well, onto the skull specifically, just different parts of the skull that when it comes to the overall morphology of Tarbosaurus's head as opposed to T Rex's, they're very different. Despite the animals being um, somewhat similar when it comes to overall musculature, the head of Tarbosaurus is not as heavily built compared to T Rex. Also, when you look at the armored dinosaurs that coexisted with Tarbosaurus, they're fairly limited. You have Vitarchia, the ankylosaur, but certain smaller species of Pachycephalosaurs, but unless it was a young, very small Tarbosaurus, the animal's likely not going to be wasting energy feeding on animals that don't weigh much more than 120 pounds, maybe
Okay, this
push
guy's
around
foot is
50
huge.
kilograms. I think I've seen this model, but I don't remember what it's from. Um, I think it's just how he's specifically um holding it. The arms are fairly skinny. I mean, the whole animal, it's off. Huh. This is an interesting illustration. I don't think it's bad. They're covering it with feathers. Tarbosaurus, probably by, or likely by full adult size, didn't have feathers. Young likely did, but I think that's a possibly a Barsboldia in the background, and then some unidentified as dark pterosaur. Barsboldia would have been one of the species of hadrosaurs that Tarbosaurus fed on. But let's see. Oh, it's not a bad illustration of Tarbosaurus. I think you can see the rib cage possibly, but putting that aside, and then the cape-like feather plumage on the back. I mean, this would be probably pretty close to accurate when it comes to the size and also height of Tarbosaurus. It's probably barely 10 feet when it came to the height of this animal, around 3 meters, and reaching a length of probably around 35 to 36 feet or pushing 11 meters. Still quite or much smaller than T Rex, but more heavily built compared to a wide range of other species of theropods. Huh. I wonder what he's carrying.
There's Xenosaurus.
Yeah, I was wondering. Just a smaller individual. Therizanosaurus, despite it being a plant eater, was a species of theropod that inhabited Mongolia about the same time as Tarbosaurus, around 70 million years ago. You also had Velociraptor at this point as well, but Velociraptor likely avoided Full-grown tarbosaurs were no match for those animals. They could simply just be smushed like a cockroach. Okay, well, here we have not a Therizinosaur, which is what sometimes many people might confuse this animal with, but it is a member of the ornithomimid lineage of theropod dinosaurs, the Dinohyrus, which is essentially the largest species of ornithomimid that we know of, reaching about 35 feet in length or 11 meters. Probably weighed somewhere around 4 to 5 tons, so about same size as Tarbosaurus. It also likely was possibly omnivorous. There seems to be evidence for the Dinohyrus feeding on not just different species of aquatic plants, but also feeding on fish. And we also have found gastrolids inside of its stomach. So essentially, stones that the animal would have swallowed to help digest the food in its gizzards, much like modern day birds. And then we have little protoceratops in the front, which would just be a snack for the animal. Okay, so thanks for joining. And from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. Happy International Avitheropod Day. And remember, the